Perspectives, Finding Common Ground, a podcast series that brings together a panel of thought leader perspectives as a forum to socialize and problem solve education technology issues with the goal to ultimately find common ground.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Perspectives, Finding Common Ground. I'm Patrick Devaney, and I'm joined with three wonderful guests today. Today, we're taking on the topic of EdTech standards, getting them all on the same page. So I think it should be an interesting conversation. And with that, I'm going to allow the panel to introduce themselves. And I'll just kind of go from left to right on my screen. We'll start with the wonderful Erin Moat.
Hi, y'all. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm Erin Moat. I'm the CEO of Innovate EDU. We are a house of brands, not a branded house. So you know us through our projects. And in this case, you would notice through our longest standing alliance and project, which also has the best name, Project Unicorn, which focuses on K-12 data interoperability. And two of our critical partners, the Ed-Fi Alliance and edtech, are joining me today for this conversation.
Fantastic. Welcome, Erin. I guess next we'll go to you, Tim.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for having me on this conversation today. I'm very grateful to speak along with all of you about this topic. I'm Tim Clark. I'm the Vice President of K-12 programs at edtech. edtech is a nonprofit membership organization made up of K-12 institutions, state departments of education, ministries of education, and also higher ed institutions and edtech providers, all collaborating and working together to solve the problems that school districts and schools face every day with interoperability among all of their learning tools and platforms. And we want to make sure that the investment that they've made in those products really comes to fruition through interoperability. And we make sure that we address the needs of all of the school districts with this collaboration.
Fantastic. Welcome, Tim. You and edtech are great partners to us and the community. We appreciate all you do. And last but certainly not least, Sean, can you introduce yourself, please?
Howdy, everyone. Sean Casey from the Ed-Fi Alliance. I work on partnerships there, especially with vendors, with EdTech product providers, trying to cultivate demand for interoperable data within those products so that it can be used across those products, because school districts and those who support students use a lot of different EdTech tools to really try to support their students and all the other end users that do support students. And I think at the end of the day, we are just trying to make it all work like teachers and students and parents and administrators need it to. And so this conversation, I'm really excited to be here representing the Ed-Fi Alliance in this conversation, because it's a partnership. And the idea is, what could we do together that separately we either couldn't or would take a lot longer to do? And I really appreciate the opportunity to work with y'all and to come talk about the work together in this podcast.
Great. Welcome. Welcome to you all. And without further ado, let's dive right in and let's talk a little bit about kind of setting the stage. Let's talk about the why behind this work is going on. Why is rostering such a critical issue for K-12 education today? And what challenges the schools and districts have as they face this? With the current approach, and what are we trying to solve here? And I guess, Sean, I'll start with you. You were last time around. Why don't you start this off?
Sure, happy to. Well, we're here because our work is community led, and our community asked us to do this. It's pretty straightforward in that way. Tim did a great job of describing the edtech community, and the Ed-Fi Alliance is similar, and we overlap an awful lot. There are an awful lot of innovators in K-12, whether they work for LEAs, local education agencies that enroll students, or SEAs, the state education agencies that support the districts and the other LEAs that support students, or vendors, folks that build products. There's a lot of different stakeholders in this K-12 education technology market. And this work is actually trying to navigate between or among those groups in order to deliver wins and really kind of organize the K-12 marketplace such that you can adopt a best of breed tool and snap it into your environment and have it be ready very quickly. immediately, if possible, for students' use and for impact, for solving that an original problem that you adopted it for, but also for providing and exchanging data that is useful across all the various systems that you utilize to support students. And so in our work at Ed-Fi, we were paying attention to the fact that some of our leaders, peer leaders in the community, had already done some work, already spent some money, invested some resources, put in the time to try to take their Ed-Fi implementation and emit OneRoster data feeds from it in order to provision their teaching and learning tools. ClassLink was one of them. There were several. Michigan Data Hub was another. The Texas Education Exchange was another. We looked to those leaders and understood what problem they were trying to solve, understood the approach that they took in trying to solve that problem. And then we came to our community at one of our community-wide convenings. It's called the Technical Congress. And we said, hey, look, here are some stories of folks that are solving a useful problem, appears to be ubiquitous, pervasive in the market. Would you agree if we propose this idea of getting behind the One Ed-Fi Alliance, getting behind the OneRoster standard for rostering applications? It's already pretty widely adopted. Should we just harness momentum and get behind the use of it for basic rostering use cases? Guess what the community said? Yes. The ones who had done it already said, yes, please do it so we don't have to keep spending money on maintaining it. The folks who hadn't done it yet said, please put it in our hands and make this work for us. We went through a series of other proposals with them that basically was about deconfusing the market. It was really about aligning together on this purpose and putting these two specifications together so that you get the best of both worlds. You get data that's sourced from a number of different source systems like student information systems and assessment platforms and others, but you can emit this consistent, high quality, high fidelity OneRoster API feed from that data in order to solve the problem of making my tools usable for students and for teachers, making them available right away as soon as they're enrolled in a class or as soon as a school year starts. And so that kicked off a collaboration between our two standards bodies that hadn't happened before. That's the first time that One EdTech and the Ed-Fi Alliance have found that commonality of purpose, resourced and supported and scoped a collaboration to go build this into our core models, meaning it's available and supported out of the box for everyone's use, and spawned pilots, field integration testing. And we're really working through those right now in order to inform how we expand the work and go forward in a way that's really influential on the market. Because together we represent something like 20 million students strong today between our two groups. And again, we share members in our communities. And so lots of those folks are familiar with both sets of standards and what jobs they serve for them. So this is really about trying to level the playing field and build a foundational set of supports out there that then the field can move up the value chain on and solve other problems with interoperable data that are meaningful to them.
I'd love to also
Erin,
just I'd love to zoom out a little bit too. And just, I think many people think rostering is already a solved problem in so many districts. And the answer is, and I know that's maybe depressing for folks on the call who are longtime listeners and are thinking like, haven't we solved this problem yet of making it easier for a teacher to use a variety of ed tech tools in their district or in their classroom? And the answer is no, we have not yet solved it. And this is a great solution that I think can deeply accelerate the market and accelerate the types of efficiencies that we know interoperability can give to teachers. And then in turn, those teachers have more time to spend on relationships with students, more time to spend on the things that move the needle on learning outcomes. And so this type of partnership, this type of collaboration, I think is the type of quick wins on the board that our sector needs, particularly right now, as not only do we see the proliferation of tools that are being used in schools and districts, but also, I know we're like 6 minutes into the podcast, so can't believe Sean hasn't said it already, but with the number of AI tools that are being introduced in schools and districts. And, the ability to really get to a core foundational issue here to make sure that the foundation of student information is solid, secure, and interoperable will pay dividends for student outcomes really over the long term.
Tim, anything to add?
Yeah, there's actually a lot. So there are several OneEdTech standards which are used pretty ubiquitously in every digital ecosystem that's mature. And I think some of those are learning tools interoperability, or LTI, which connects your learning tools together. QTI, question test interoperability for assessment items, which also addresses accessibility within those assessment items. But a big one is OneRoster. And because, as Aaron said, this is still such a huge problem. And part of it is a security issue as well, too. You don't want teachers having to manage rostering of applications on their own. It should be done seamlessly for them. And then another thing, when we talk about AI being able to use structured data, such as you can achieve from the Ed-Fi data standard, is with the implementation of OneRoster or other potential standards, is huge for being able to make real, authentic recommendations to teachers and students about resources and personalized learning. But a structured data set is much more important, much more valid, and much more secure than when you're talking about implementing AI, than using just whatever data you're farming from a variety of different sources. So that's really important for us to keep in mind as we think about AI. How are we providing or structuring data in a way that it can be used meaningfully and seamlessly and securely about when we're talking about student data in particular?
Right. So kind of with that as a foundation, I think you all did a wonderful job of framing the need, the why. There's something that I want to be clear about, and that is, this is not a new standard. This is the collaboration and the merger of existing standards. So the objective here is simplification. And maybe we can start with you, Tim, but can you talk a little bit about what this collaboration looks like? And how are you working with Ed-Fi, and how do others like Project Unicorn and Aaron have the chance to weigh in and help build better answers?
Sure. We have when we all came together and we decided how we would collaborate, we set up some governance around a steering committee that focuses in on rostering. Some, as Sean was saying, we've had some partners in our communities that have already been making it work on their own because of the fact that it was essential to solve this problem. So as he was saying, Michigan Data Hub was already working on this. And we have several others that were already investigating how they could utilize the capabilities of OneRoster in addition to the Ed-Fi data standard to be able to seamlessly roster all of their EdTech tools and applications, but also be able to utilize the data achievable from the Ed-Fi data standard. I found out today that Puerto Rico was actually really investigating this work on their own too. But we had all of these trailblazers that were already setting the stage for us. So, and not just on the institutional side, but on the provider side as well, or the supplier side. So it was bringing together this rostering steering committee that involved both the suppliers and the institutional leaders, the agency leaders, state departments of education, some key district leaders, and then bringing them together to show how they've already done that, and then to come up with a way that was like a blueprint that other people could follow, and making sure that it's all open and accessible to anyone who wants to implement it and use it across any platform or with any other agency. So we've been on a kind of like evangelization tour, and where we've really been sharing out more information about this. And Aaron really helps us a lot in that area as far as like getting together people to find out more about how they can implement this too.
Great. Aaron,
well, I'm gonna start by saying, Project Unicorn is the Church of Interoperability, and I guess we're just saying on this evangelical theme. I think anything that helps demystify interoperability, make it smarter, faster, and better for adoption for districts, for states, I think is something that Project Unicorn is very, very focused. And here you have two outstanding partners, members of the Project Unicorn steering committee, but just leaders in this space who are saying, how do we make it easier for educators? How do we make it easier for state leaders? And then how do we sort of like kick the tires as we develop this? So I just want to really pull out this point that it's a supply and demand side solution. And that the thing you heard Sean talk about where they're at right now is this sort of like iterative user feed, because it doesn't sort of matter if a standard collaborates, is it useful in the field? And so I think one of the things that is really remarkable about this partnership is this idea of driven by the field, developed by the field, deployed in the field. And that has meant that it's sort of better, faster, and fit for purpose. And I'm so excited for the groundwork that this lays. I think these two organizations need to be held up and lauded for their work and for this type of partnership. I give them so much credit for coming together and really saying, how do we collaborate, not compete? And then the last thing, I'll say just in my preaching around interoperability is I think what's incredibly valuable about these types of partnerships is they give folks in the field social license to innovate. They give folks the ability to say, this is how we're modernizing our data infrastructure. We're not going to sort of take it all on right now. We're going to take on the high efficiency, high effective use cases around rostering, and then we'll move up the value chain to interoperability. I think the thing we see in this, in the state of sector reporting, you'll see this when we release it again in October of this year, is that the folks who are succeeding at large scale data modernization and infrastructure around interoperability, privacy, and security are those who take it as sort of a longer journey, who bite off manageable kind of chunks at a time, and who do it really with teams between IT, academics, and security and privacy folks, and then have a wider circle of stakeholder engagement. So just really think it's so important that when we build these partnerships and we look to accelerate this work in the field, that we do it exactly like this partnership has come together, one of collaboration, not competition.
Thank you. And I want to hear your thoughts on that as well in a second here, Sean, but I'd like you to also kind of weave into that some of your thoughts around ensuring that this alignment stays true and that it does in fact minimize the confusion in the field. Because there's always the risk of the stray thought getting out there and running wild. How are you making sure that we don't allow that to happen? Because it is such good work so far.
That's right. I mean, to put it in plain English, one of the proposals we ran by the community at the very beginning was to not make this one and done, right? To have this be an ongoing collaboration. That means, like, the way that's turned into reality is there's a product team from EdTech and from the Ed-Fi Alliance that meets together to work through their specs alignment together. There's a technical and development team from EdTech and from the Ed-Fi Alliance that gets together to figure out how are we going to pull these design principles around this collaboration into our roadmap so that these API endpoints are very usable, very consistent, core supported, go through updates, go through security testing, are regularly updated for the enhancements that get created in the data standard itself. There's go-to-market coordination on both sides. That's really where Tim and I work an awful lot together, is committing or growing the number of commitments out there in the field to make use of this, because I think all four of us maybe have spoken to this to some degree, but there are lots of problems that we need to solve in education that we need data to solve. Period. We owe it to our students. This is where I start to preach a little bit. Right? We have these students for 180 school days a year, and it goes by in a blur. For anybody who's ever been a classroom teacher or an administrator, we're supported them. And we can't waste instructional time. And so one of the big outcomes, one of the big payoffs, like what's different before and after this collaboration, is the fact these tools, learning tools, teaching and learning and assessment tools especially, can be very usable, can be immediately usable by folks that are making use of this specs alignment with the latest and greatest information that we know about these students, from their enrollment, from their schedule, from their demographics, from the other special supports that they may get, or the special programs that they may be enrolled in. And so this is kind of a both and proposition where you can solve basic rostering use cases in a highly consistent quality way with current information. And this is like capital I. You want more data because you have more nuanced ways to put it to work. This allows you to go retrieve other kinds of data outside of the OneRoster spec that Ed-Fi enables. And so this is really this both and of a foundational piece, which I think Aaron spoke to really well, but also the additional nuanced data elements or descriptions or things we know about students that allow us to make those tools like right in their hands, readily and immediately usable and useful, and no wasted instructional time. That's really the state that we are seeking. And so your question was, how do we maintain it? Like, how do we ensure that this is ongoing support? And the way I answer it is to say, it is core product roadmap committed on both sides. And that was an important tenet, like a design principle of this collaboration. It's actually one of the things we asked the community to vote on right up front. So are we solving every problem in the universe? No. Are we solving a foundational one that we can build upon? Yes.
Good deal. Tim, you have anything to add to that?
I hope not.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to talk over you.
You're good.
Tim,
Well,
anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that this opens up so many additional opportunities when we think about career pathways for students and how they enter workforce or higher ed. And I mean, like, this gives us so many other things by solving this foundational problem. And it really opens up the door to a whole lot of other potential things that we could really dig into to really make a difference for students and teachers. But it's a collaboration that benefits not just the institutions for their time for implementation and for teachers being able to focus on the instruction, or as Aaron said, to get to know their students better and talk to them and understanding more about what makes them tick. But it also helps the providers as well, because you have a faster implementation for your customers, for the institutions and the agencies. ClassLink has done an excellent job helping the state of Delaware, for a very specific example, to accomplish and overcome the obstacle that's involved in rostering and to be able to provide this analytical information. So that's just like one example of a success story. And we're seeing more and more of those happen. And it's kind of like you can't stop the tidal wave that's happening now, because once you have addressed the foundational problem, you're able to do so much more with the data than we've ever been able to accomplish.
Fantastic. I want to move, and I want to have Aaron comment on kind of the work that's happening, but I also want you, Aaron, as the representative that's kind of in the middle and the evangelism, to talk about positive impacts on students and learning. What is this really going to mean for educators and for students and administrators as it moves forward and rostering becomes simpler and faster, and possibly other standards get consolidated into more effective versions?
Yeah, I am excited to talk about student outcomes. I'm going to start by talking about something that maybe not everybody thinks is sexy, but I do as well, which is the security of my students' data. And one of the things that is really important about this partnership is that it really amps up the security that's available around rostering because of those secure API endpoints. And why is that important? It's because when you talk to parents and when you talk to communities and when you talk to kids, now more and more, they want to know, especially young adults, they want to know what's happening in my data, who has access to my data, what tools are being used in different environments. And I think there's going to be conversation, particularly with AI, There's going to be conversations happening at open houses and at back to school nights about the set of edtech tools that are being used, about the use of technology in schools more and more. You know, we're seeing the growth of cell phone bans. We're seeing the growth of No Tech Tuesdays in schools. And so how do you help parent communities, students feel good about when edtech is used, when these tools are used in this environment, that their students' information is being shared in an interoperable, secure way? So that's the first thing, like a teacher, an educator, a school having the ability to answer that security and data privacy question is really, really important. And then when we can move to what Sean is talking about, which is gaining instructional time. You know, I used to run a school in Brooklyn, and we were laser focused on how many instructional minutes a day we could maximize. And that meant like, even at our high school, instead of students changing classes, could we have the teacher change the class, do a student stretch break, and then get right back? Because the passing period meant we lost 7 to 10 instructional minutes, and moving the teacher on average meant we lost 3 to 5 instructional minutes. Instructional minutes are gold in any classroom. And so any time that we can allow for more time for interaction and for learning between the educator and the student, that is what we should all be maximizing. So this is why I think you hear me talk about this as really a tool that will have a deep impact on student outcomes, because I know how much time educators and school districts tell us they're spending on solving simple problems like rostering. And so I am really excited for any partnership that allows for there to be more time for us to do what is essentially the business of education, which is human to human interaction. And so that's the type of work that as a tech community, we should be thinking about. How do we use data to make a good teacher a great teacher by giving them access to more real-time data? How do we give them back those instructional minutes? How do we give them more time to focus on the thing that we actually know moves the needle for young people, which is caring relationships with a loving adult in schools? And so that has wide-ranging effects, not just on teaching and learning, but honestly on student mental health. We know that when a young person has that relationship with just one adult in a school building who knows them and who they feel like understands what they care about, understands what their passion, in young people, the CDC has found that that reduces suicidal ideation by a third. One caring relationship reduces suicidal ideation by 33%. That's never going to happen with an AI chatbot. That's never going to happen in our space, quite like it will if we focus on that human-to-human relationship in education. So maybe that surprises people because I'm the preacher of interoperability, that I'm talking about deepening and strengthening that human connection. But that's really what happens when you have that strong foundation.
It really opens the door for that relationship to happen.
Absolutely.
And expands time for that relationship to happen.
Totally. And even just if you like have the ability to see a student who is passionate about science, right? And that literature teacher has the ability to see, you know, in an edtech tool that maybe brings that information together, how well that student is doing in science. As a literature teacher, maybe I assign the reading a little bit differently. Maybe I use that passion to unlock a love of literature, a love of writing. And so increasingly, I think we know from brain science and neuroscience that all students are jagged learners. And it's really about how we really think about unlocking that connection to deeper learning in order to really get the types of student outcomes that we want on everything from metacognition to reducing chronic absenteeism. When kids are more engaged and connected to school, chronic absenteeism goes down, their ability to connect across domains goes up, and the types of durable skills that employers need, to Tim's point about workforce, show up more and more and more in the proficiency column. And so that's the stuff we should be focused on.
Other thoughts? Yeah.
Can I add on that? I think so. Amazing points and very much the why, right? Very much the why, like Aaron nailed it. There's a flip side to that too, which is that was all kind of through the practitioner lens, right? Like what it enables educators to do on behalf of students through time and through the ability to forge relationships with them and develop them. I'd argue that I think another outcome that we're going to see from this is that because we're doing the blocking and tackling, that right now is something that all product providers, like the EdTech developers, have to build and create themselves. Same with the implementers, like the Michigan Jobs, the ClassLinks, the Texas Education Exchange, the EdGraphs of the world, that were our early adopters that we look to. By supporting these things natively through standards, through open standards that are future-proofed, that are core supported, that have an ongoing support for them, we also position those providers to differentiate and to innovate. And so this is also, it's like flip side of the coin to Aaron's point. This is also creating this space for EdTech product managers, product owners, product designers to really put in place best practice, differentiated, niche solutions for things because they're not having to spend resources on this basic fundamental work.
Yeah, I would just like to say, to me, it's just like plumbing or electricity. When you move into a house, you expect those things to work. You don't expect that you have to go out there and do it yourself. So it's the same kind of thing for teachers. We just want it to work. If they don't even know about Ed-Fi or OneEdTech, that's expected because they just want their EdTech tools to work, and it gives them all this time. And like Sean was saying, providers too. These should just be the foundational or fundamental ways that you do engage in the design. So you don't even need to worry about that part. You already got that part solved. Now you can be more innovative. And that's the same thing we want for teachers, to give them an opportunity to innovate in their classroom.
Great. Well, rich conversation. I'd like to ask you kind of about next steps first, and then I want you all to be able to say what we can do about it. But let's start with what we're talking right now about activity that's happening in the field, and we're looking for making improvements real time. What are the next steps to this? What happens the day after tomorrow? What happens next quarter? What happens next year in terms of this work and the focus of this work? Start.
Guess who gets to decide? The community. We really our next steps from the Ed-Fi and OneEdTech collaboration perspective. We convene again in 6 weeks at the Ed-Fi Summit. It's an annual event, and it's October 6th through the 8th in San Antonio. And at each of our community convenings, both OneEdTech's community convenings like Learning Impact and Ed-Fi Alliance's convenings like the Summit and the Technical Congress, we've been pulling together the steering committee for this collaboration every single time. We do a lot of work in between those convenings too, but we always take advantage of those face-to-face times in order to really drive some deep work together. And at this next convening, in the beginning of October, about 6 weeks out, we are having that exact conversation, Patrick, which is retrospective on the pilots and the early field integration testing and the feedback on that synthesized architecture that came from the early adopters, plans for expansion and the folks that have committed to do that in their time frame. But then that's really looking at the what's next. You think about a Kanban board, it's sort of like the what's next column of our Kanban board to say, what is the thing that we should tackle next? And the community decides. These folks who have skin in the game, especially, this is not like an admire it from the sidelines thing. This is we have implemented this, we have done this, we want to build on this, right? This is very much an ongoing commitment kind of piece, but that's exactly where we're taking it is what is the next worthy problem that the field is facing is pervasive. It is a pervasive market problem that we could collaborate on together and lighten that load and deliver that value for the field and for all of the students that we ultimately support.
Great.
Tim,
I
What would
have
you-
some suggestions. I have
Trying
like,
to see working.
I mean, there's a lot that we can do and things that would really excite me. There's a lot we can do around the alignment of instructional resources to academic standards and tying that into assessment results for students that I think could really help us with giving teachers and students recommendations of resources and activities that are geared toward the students' interests and to make sure that we are giving them the right learning resource at the right time to address their needs and their interests. That is something that we would be able to collaboratively work on together. I think, again, taking that data, looking at it longitudinally to be able to help students determine and map learning pathways and career pathways for entering into workforce, and then thinking of ways to recognize that with digital credentials would be huge. And then I also think that looking at decentralized IDs, uniform IDs for everything from resource directories, but also professional learning catalogs, again, learning resources, all kinds of things could be securely named through decentralized IDs, and then using them as, again, a foundational backbone for how you would be able to, again, recommend resources based on a student's needs, interests, and so on. So I think all of those things together are some just exciting opportunities that we could collaborate on across our communities. And because of finishing this foundational first step about rostering and connecting rostering to data and analytics, I think that it just opens the door to so many other things. I'm sure that Erin's been thinking about her wish list too.
Oh, I have. But I'll say a couple of things that we're sort of all working on together that folks who are listening to the podcast can get excited about over like the next 6 months. So by the end of September, Project Unicorn will release a map, an interactive map that shows the use cases at the SEA, so at the State Education Agency across 3 domains, schema and data alignment, infrastructure and transit, for a host of standards, Ed-Fi and what edtech, but beyond. And we're excited to be able to do that work. We're working with every state CIO right now. Literally, we're sending out emails this morning to verify the data, to make this sort of interactive map available to the field by the end of September. We hope that transparency around how standards are being used and in what context, and these are standards that are in production, rather than just sort of like design or development. Standards in production, we think, gives a nice roadmap, not just to state education agencies and folks who are thinking about modernizing their data infrastructure, but also, to Sean's point, the edtech vendor and solution provider community around where collaboration could happen. And again, it's a SEA sort of use case resource, not LEAs. Maybe we'll go 16,000 data points next, but we started with just 50 plus. The other thing that we're going to be releasing at Project Unicorn, like we do every year, is the State of the Sector report. There's going to be more questions this year on implementation, on cybersecurity. And so that is something for folks to get excited about and look towards October for that. And then the other 2 things I'll name really quick that are coming in really short order, which we hope are helpful for the field, are a resource around AI, interoperability, and privacy, particularly for edtech solution providers, around how to think about interoperability and privacy and a solid foundation when thinking about the use of safe AI tools in the education space. And then the thing I'm so excited about is, because it comes right from the field, is groundbreaking stories from the field from the state of New York around how they are thinking about interoperable workforce data and interoperable education data to use Ed-Fi's educator data prep model alongside some student information and educator information to really bring together the first vestiges of a LER for educators to really keep track of when they're certified, when they're doing continuing education, and how to apply that in the education use case. This work is I think, so groundbreaking in New York. Texas really paved the way, I think, for some of this other work. And when we talk about the portability of credentials for learners, who can include educators, I think this is a really interesting use case to bring into the world. So look for those resources coming from Project Unicorn, and really trumpeting the work where standards and interoperability are revolutionizing the way we do education.
Fantastic. I think this is such a rich and important conversation. And unfortunately, we are going to run out of time pretty quick here, but I do want to give one last chance for the shout out. What is it people can do? How can people get involved? How can people help? And how can people take advantage of this, or start to learn more and really leverage it in their own world? So, anybody want to go first, or I think I'm going to start with Erin, given the fact that she's already designated the preacher today. Let's see what she has to say about going forward.
Yeah, I'm going to take you to church. I mean, I think if you're solving the rostering problem yourself, stop right now and look at this solution. If you're doing that on spreadsheets, or you're doing that in tools that really don't put interoperability, privacy, and security, we hold up the giant stop sign from the pulpit of interoperability and say stop. I think there's lots of ways to get engaged and involved. The Ed-Fi Alliance and OneEdTech are doing these early pilots and are going to be releasing resources into the field, not just looking at text, but really making sure that those resources are available. So I would really encourage you to reach out to the standards bodies to know what to do, how to do it, and move it forward. And we're going to be talking about the success stories in those pilots moving forward, and really helping people learn from others in the field who are forging that path forward, whether that's great folks like Sean's mentioned already with Michigan Data Hub, or others on the solution provider side who are really grabbing the bull by the horns here and embracing the rostering sort of scale piece of this work. Sean, I'll pass it to you.
Sure. So Patrick, we'll provide you with a page that either to accompany the communication about this podcast, or even to insert the QR code if it's possible as you do your final edits. But that gives the whole idea is to have a clearinghouse of the latest and greatest information about what's happening, who is doing this work, how to engage, and what to expect. And we're trying to make it as attainable and easy for folks to take advantage of as possible. The thing I would just kind of like set expectations on is there's 18,000 school districts in this country, right? 18,000 LEAs, and their capabilities vary widely. They also have a lot of priorities on their plates. And so we're not looking to them to implement 18,000 different things. We're really looking for this to be partner-led. We're really looking for this to be supported by the products that they license and use, like student information systems, their assessment platforms and such. We're also looking for them as they join with their peers and do multi-district initiatives. We usually call those data hubs, but it's something through educational service agencies often, like the Michigan Data Hub that we've mentioned a few times, or the Texas Education Exchange, or a couple of examples of that. And these are these one-to-many implementations where the technical expertise is concentrated in the middle, in the center, and districts become beneficiaries of the work. They don't have to implement all of these things themselves. If you're in one of those states, take advantage of it. This is meant to power them and give those benefits to you directly in your hands. Or state education agencies, like Delaware was referenced earlier, many of them now are making the turn from like one-way compliance engines where you send data useful for accountability and state reporting purposes. Historically, maybe that was just one way, like data was just provided there for those purposes. Many of them are turning the corner now to realize, hey, this data that we have collected is actually useful for a variety of reasons. The Ed-Fi data standard lets me exchange it in real time. How about if I turn it back to the districts in a way that's useful to them, like a OneRoster API feed they can use to connect their teaching and learning tools to roster them with that current comprehensive data. And so there's a variety of ways that we reach. I think of these as like channels, right? ClassLink is another example of one, like a managed service provider who productizes these kinds of solutions into something that a district can just license and use and get a bunch of support in using and have rapid kind of time to value in using a partner for it. So the thing I would set as an expectation is think of this as an offering or an approach that you can take advantage of to support your district through one of these channel type approaches, because when it's partner led, it can scale, it can be supported really well, it can rapidly get you the benefits without putting you through all of the work individually in your district. It's just a wise move to go where the technical expertise is concentrated. And those are the things we've seen the most success with. And so this collaboration is following those patterns.
And bonus, if you do that, it's really easy to get the Project Unicorn Level 4 certification, which we know is one of the most widely used criteria for tool selection in our space. So bonus for those edtech solution providers.
Hey, ClassLink's done it.
You are among the first.
Tim, any thoughts on a call to action or suggestions for folks listening out there?
Yeah. So we are going to share out a page that we've collaboratively put together with all of the steps. All of our information is all open. Also, we've mentioned lots of references as far as states that are already engaged in this work. I would definitely, one of the things that I think we really do is bring people together to collaborate and communicate and share ideas from each other. So you're not always reinventing the wheel. You do have a blueprint to follow. And then also, Aaron talked about it too, certification. All three of our organizations certify edtech products. When you're looking for products, check out those certification results and require that your edtech providers certify before you buy so that way you don't have buyer's remorse. Make sure that you have certification there. We validate to make sure that these interoperability solutions are going to work better for districts and states when they want to implement new products. So you need to check those out and make sure that you require that certification.
Fantastic. I'm going to try to summarize some of the things that we agreed on today. I mean, there wasn't a lot of opposition to any of the thoughts here today, but there was an awful lot discussed. So if I had to kind of create some cliff notes about what we agreed on today, let me see how good I can do it, how well I can do at this. Okay. Number one, this is a community-driven activity, and it's one that the community says, hey, we're kind of confused. We're struggling with this. What can be done? And this is an effort that we're seeing being undertaken that is not to create a whole new standard. No, it's to take what we have and let's drive it together. Let's drive it together in the field, because the users are currently in the field. The supplier of the tools, the users of the tools are also all in the field. So the field work that we're doing here is the rapidest way to get the solutions out there, to get them implemented. This is not a one and done initiative. The intention here is to keep working at it and to have everybody that's involved, whether they're providers or standard bodies or customers, make it a core tenet of theirs to take advantage of these interoperable tools that are being created and best practices that are being generated. We also want to look at some of the benefits of this, and data privacy and security is clearly at the top of the list, but adding efficiency and adding the efficacy, improving the efficacy of the standards has direct impact on the bottom line for students, getting more time with the teachers that care about them, that want to personalize and work with them one-on-one. But that same efficiency also helps the ed tech providers spend more time and energy on building new tools and new options for the educators and the learners to take advantage of. All of this will produce successes, and more successes create greater opportunities. So you've got new opportunities to personalize tools, to map learning and career pathways, for uniform IDs to get individuals and products better understood. Very, very important today to be prepared for AI, the interoperability and privacy that's required from it, and ultimately might even drive towards a lifelong learner record that could help across all spectrums, even into the workforce. So the call to action here is get involved, pay attention to these standards, pay attention to what's successful, and stay up with the changes. The community continues to change. You see that with AI, that's going to be driving a lot of things differently in the coming time. But what's really important is to stay engaged, learn about it, and find new ways that you can leverage it every day.
Great job.
I have a little AI tool over. No, I really didn't. I swear to God, I did not use AI for
That was awesome.
I think you guys are just wonderful people. I enjoy spending time with all of you. And I think your passion and commitment to this cause is just genuine, but it's absolutely one of the most generous things that I see people do on a day in and day out basis. So I applaud you all. I thank you for your efforts. And I thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I hope you'll all agree to come back sometime in the near future. For all those listening at home, please don't be a stranger. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for listening. ClassLink is proud to be the meeting place to facilitate these conversations. If you have a topic idea, send it to perspectives@classlink.com. To keep hearing our perspectives, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.